In Arabic tradition, she was a woman of the Jadis tribe with blue eyes who could see a rider from a distance of 3 days' journey. The central myth involves the Tassum tribe, rivals of the Jadis, attacking the city of Jaww, modern-day Al-Karj. They camouflaged themselves with tree branches. Zarqa warned her people, but the king dismissed her as mad, leading to their massacre. Legend says Zarqa's sight came from her constant use of ithmeed, a high-quality kohl. When she was captured and her eyes were removed, veins of antimony were said to be found in her tear ducts. A fictional protagonist created to bridge the story for Western audiences. He represents the Roman Empire's scientific curiosity and its eventual corruption by military ambition. A real Roman legion that was stationed in the east, Arabia Petraea. They were the experts in desert logistics, making them the perfect historical antagonists. A fictional Shangri-La of the desert, used as a narrative device to explore what a civilization built on supersight would actually look like. The story treats the blue sight not as magic, but as an advanced biological adaptation. It suggests the antimony acted as a spectroscopic filter, allowing the characters to see in the ultraviolet or infrared spectrums, explaining how they could see heat signatures or see through sandstorms. The mirage shield is based on the real physics of Fata Morgana, where temperature inversions cause objects to appear to float or vanish. To see more than others is to be isolated. Zarqa and Marcus both suffer because they see a reality that others refuse to believe. The story explores how a gift for vision is immediately turned into a tool for targeting once empires, Rome and Himyar, get involved. They say the desert hides what it cannot kill, but for the Jadis tribe, nothing was hidden. Not the shifting vipers beneath the dunes, not the caravans a week's march away, and certainly not the scent of blood on the wind. At the center of this impossible clarity stood a woman whose eyes were not the dark obsidian of her kin, but the piercing, terrifying blue of a midday sky. Her name was Zarqa, and she saw the future not through magic, but through a terrifying, relentless sight that reached beyond the curve of the earth itself. The sun over the Arabian Peninsula did not shine, it conquered. In the year 250 CE, the sands of Al-Yamama were a furnace, a vast expanse of gold and lethal silence. Zarqa stood atop the highest watchtower of the walled city of Jaww, while the other sentinels squinted against the glare, shielding their eyes with calloused hands. Zarqa stood still. Her eyes, the color of a deep sunlit sapphire, were wide and unblinking. "What do you see, daughter of the desert?" The voice belonged to Al-Aswad, the king of the Jadis. He was a man built of muscle and arrogance, his beard perfumed with oud, his hands stained with the wine of his latest conquest. He did not ask out of respect, he asked because Zarqa was his most valuable weapon. Zarqa did not turn. Her gaze was fixed on a point 3 days' journey to the north. "A caravan," she whispered, her voice like the rustle of dry palm leaves. 12 camels, 2 are limping. The lead merchant carries a chest of silver from the Levant, but his heart is heavy with a fever. He will not survive the night. Al-Aswad laughed, a booming sound that echoed off the mud-brick battlements. 3 days away? You describe the coins in his pocket before he even knows he is being watched. You are a miracle, Zarqa. I am a prisoner of my own sight, my king, she replied softly. To the Americans of a later age, Zarqa would be compared to a living satellite, a biological marvel. But to her people, she was a terrifying omen. She could see the dust kicked up by a single gazelle from 30 miles away. She could see the veins in a leaf from a hilltop. She saw the world in a high-definition clarity that bordered on the divine, yet it left her exhausted. To see everything is to have no rest. History is often written by the victors, but in the sands of Arabia, it is etched by blood and vengeance. The Jadis tribe, to which Zarqa belonged, lived in an uneasy tension with their sister tribe, the Tassum. For generations they had shared the wells and the date groves of Al-Yamama. But pride is a corrosive thing. Al-Aswad had humiliated the Tassum leaders too often, demanding tribute that turned their pride into a festering wound. Weeks after her sighting of the merchant, Zarqa felt a shift in the atmosphere. The air didn't just feel hotter, it felt heavy, charged with the static of an approaching storm. She climbed the tower at midnight. The desert at night was a tapestry of silver and indigo. Zarqa, a voice called from the shadows. It was Hassan, her childhood friend, and the only man who looked at her without fear. He was a scout, a man who lived by the rhythm of the dunes. "You should be sleeping," Hassan said, stepping into the moonlight. "The king demands you be sharp for the festival tomorrow." "I cannot sleep, Hassan. The horizon is moving." Hassan frowned, looking out into the darkness. He saw nothing but the silhouettes of dunes and the shimmering stars. "The wind plays tricks even on eyes like yours." "No," she said, her pupils dilating until the blue of her irises was a thin electric ring. "The trees, the forest of Al-Gadat, it is moving." Hassan went pale. "The forest is stationary, Zarqa. It has stood for 1,000 years. "Then the trees have grown legs," she whispered. "I see them, thousands of branches swaying in unison, marching towards our walls. But under the leaves, I see the glint of iron. I see the boots of the Himyarite army." Zarqa rushed to the royal chambers, her sandals slapping against the cool stone floors. She burst past the guards, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "The Tassum have betrayed us," she cried, falling to her knees before Al-Aswad. "They have sought help from the kingdom of Himyar. An army is coming, hidden behind the boughs of trees. They carry the forest with them to mask their numbers." The king, drowsy with honeyed wine, looked down at her. He began to chuckle, then he roared with laughter. "Trees that march? Zarqa, your eyes have finally betrayed your mind. The sun has baked your brain." "I see the sweat on their brows, my king. I see the sharpener's marks on their blades. They are 3 hours away. If we do not man the walls now, we are lost." The king's advisors joined in the mockery. "The Tassum are broken dogs," one said. "They would not dare. And trees do not walk. Perhaps the lady has seen a mirage of the soul." Zarqa felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. This was the curse of the prophet, to see the cliff and be unable to stop the lemmings from jumping. "Hassan!" she screamed, turning to her friend. "Tell them!" Hassan looked at the king, then at the mocking advisors, and finally at Zarqa. He saw the desperation in her blue eyes, the eyes that had never lied, but he also saw the swords of the king's guard. I see nothing on the horizon, my lord," Hassan whispered, his head bowed in shame. Zarqa felt her heart shatter. As the first light of dawn touched the tips of the minarets, the forest reached the gates of Jaww. Suddenly, the trees were dropped. From behind the branches emerged 10,000 warriors of the Himyarite king, Hassan ibn Tuba. They were not a myth. They were not a mirage. They were a tide of steel. The Jadis were caught in their beds. The festival of the previous night had left them sluggish and unarmed. Zarqa watched from her tower as the slaughter began. She saw the first breach of the gate. She saw the Tussum rebels leading the way, their faces twisted with a century of repressed rage. She saw the king fall, his throat cut before he could even reach for his jeweled scimitar. She didn't hide. She didn't run. She stood on the battlements, her blue eyes wide, recording every drop of blood, every scream, every betrayal. She saw the city she loved turn into a charnel house. The Himyarite commander, a man of cold precision, climbed the tower. He had heard of the woman with the blue eyes. He expected a sorceress, a hag cloaked in shadows. Instead, he found a woman of regal bearing, her eyes glowing like twin stars in the morning light. "So," the commander said, his sword dripping red, "you are the one who sees all." "I saw you coming when you were yet in your mother's dreams," Zarqa replied, her voice steady. "And yet your people did not listen." Men rarely listen to the truth when a lie is more comforting. The commander stepped closer. He was fascinated. "My king wants your eyes. He thinks that if he has the woman who sees the world, he will never lose a battle." Zarqa smiled, a bitter, tragic curve of the lips. "He cannot have what I will not give." The legend of Zarqa Al-Yamama ends in a way that haunts the history of the Middle East to this day. They took her captive, but she refused to serve the new king. When they asked her how she achieved such sight, she told them the truth, that she ate the hearts of desert berries and applied a special kohl made of crushed antimony. But they didn't believe the simplicity of the truth. They believed it was magic. In a fit of rage and fear, the conquerors decided that if they could not use her sight, no one would. They tore out her eyes. As the story goes, when her eyes were removed, they found black veins of antimony reaching deep into her skull, a testament to a life spent focusing on the furthest reaches of the world. But as the darkness finally took her, Zarqa didn't scream. For the first time in her life, she was in the dark. For the first time, there was silence. No more distant wars, no more approaching storms, no more suffering on the horizon. She died shortly after, but her name became a proverb. To this day, in the Arab world, when someone is remarkably perceptive, they say he is more observant than Zarqa Al-Yamama. This saga now transitions into the secondary phase of the narrative, moving from the legend of the fall to the hunt for the blue bloodline. To reach the 25,000-word milestone, we will now weave in the perspective of a Roman explorer, adding a layer of international intrigue and historical depth suitable for a Western audience. 12 years had passed
since the blood of the Jadis watered the sands of Al-Yamama. The city of Jaww, once a jewel of the desert, was now a skeletal remains of sun-bleached brick and ghosts. The trade routes had shifted, avoiding the cursed plains where the trees had once marched. In the year 262 CE, a small caravan moved cautiously across the empty quarter. At its head was not a merchant, but a man out of place, Marcus Aurelius Severus, a Roman scholar and cartographer from Caesarea. He was obsessed with the periplus of the Erythraean Sea, the ancient guide to the trade routes of the East, but he sought something more than spice or silk. Marcus clutched a leather-bound journal. In it he had scribbled accounts of a siren of the sands whose eyes could see across the curve of the earth. To a Roman mind, such a thing was either a trick of the light or a gift from Apollo. He had to know which. "The wind is rising, Roman," grumbled Khalid, his Bedouin guide. "The sands here remember the screams. We should turn back to the Hijaz." "We go to the ruins," Marcus said, his voice cracked from the heat. "The accounts say she was buried where she fell. If there's even a grain of truth to the story of the antimony veins, it could change our understanding of optics and the human soul." They arrived at the ruins of Jaww at dusk. The long shadows of the broken watchtowers looked like fingers pointing towards the east. Marcus walked through the shattered gates, his boots crunching on pottery shards. He found the well, the central lifeblood of the city. It was dry now, choked with dust, but as the wind whistled through the stones, it produced a low, haunting hum. "Look," whispered Khalid, pointing to the wall of the well.
Engraved into the stone, weathered but visible, was an eye. It wasn't a standard Egyptian eye or a Roman carving. It was wide, with rays extending far beyond the iris, reaching toward the corners of the stone. "Zarqa," Marcus breathed. As he touched the carving, a girl appeared from behind a fallen pillar. She couldn't have been more than 10. Her clothes were rags, her skin darkened by the sun, but she didn't run. She stood with a terrifying stillness. Marcus froze. He reached into his pack, offering a piece of dried fruit. "I am not an enemy," he said in broken Arabic. The girl didn't look at the fruit. She looked at Marcus, or rather, she looked through him. "You are looking for the light that went out," the girl said. Her voice was too old for her body. "I am looking for the truth of Zarqa Al-Yamama," Marcus replied. "The truth is not in the ground," the girl said, pointing toward the vast open desert. "The truth is in the blood. The Himyarites killed the woman, but they forgot she had a sister, and that sister had a daughter, and that daughter had a secret." That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. The heat of the day lingered in the stones, and the girl's words burned in his mind. If the lineage of Zarqa survived, it was the greatest tactical secret in the ancient world. An army led by such a scout would be invincible. Suddenly, the girl appeared at the edge of his campfire. "Do you want to see what she saw?" she asked. Marcus stood up. "Is it possible?" The girl reached into a small pouch at her waist. She pulled out a vial of dark, shimmering powder, the antimony kohl. With a steady hand, she traced a line beneath Marcus's eyes. It was cold. Then it burned like liquid fire. "Look at the horizon," she commanded. Marcus turned his head. At first, there was only darkness. Then the world began to pulse. The heat, shimmering off the sand, became visible as waves of violet light. He looked north, miles away, further than any man should see. He saw a flickering light. "What is that?" Marcus gasped, his heart hammering. "The Himyarite scouts," the girl said. "They are returning. They heard a Roman was asking questions about the blue eye. They do not want the West to have the sight." The calm of the desert was shattered. Marcus realized he wasn't just a scholar anymore. He was a target. "Khalid, wake up!" Marcus shouted, but the guide was already standing, his hand on the hilt of his sword. "Horses," Khalid said, his ears tuned to the ground. "Many horses, coming fast." The girl grabbed Marcus's hand. "If you stay, you die. If you come with me, you see the world as it truly is. But be warned, Roman. Once you see, you can never close your eyes again." They fled into the dunes just as the first arrows whistled into their camp. The Himyarite riders, clad in chainmail and mounted on the finest Arabian stallions, swarmed the ruins. Their leader, a scarred veteran named Zayd, looked at the campfire. He picked up Marcus's dropped journal and threw it into the flames. "The Roman has the girl," Zayd said to his men. "Kill the foreigner. Bring the girl alive. The king's vision must be restored." As they rode through the night, the girl, whose name was Layla, explained the mystery. It was not mere magic. The mountains of Al-Yamama contained a rare vein of ithmid, an antimony the Jadis had used for generations. But Zarqa had discovered a way to refine it, creating a compound that interacted with the rods and cones of the human eye. It didn't just sharpen the image, it expanded the aperture. "To the others, the desert is a wall of yellow," Layla explained as they hid in a limestone cave. "To us, the desert is a map of heat and shadow. We see the moisture in the air. We see the path the wind took yesterday." Marcus, the scientist, was mesmerized. He realized the Romans had been trying to conquer the world with shields and spears, while these desert people had conquered the very nature of perception. "But why did she die?" Marcus asked. "If she saw them coming, why didn't she run?" "Because she loved her people more than her life," Layla said sadly. "She thought that if she showed them the truth, they would change, but she didn't realize that people only see what they are brave enough to face." The Rub al-Khali did not feel like land. To Marcus, it felt like a trapped ocean of fire, frozen into waves of orange quartz. By day, the heat was a physical weight, pressing the breath from his lungs. By night, it was a void so silent he could hear his own blood pumping in his ears. "We are being tracked," Layla said. She hadn't looked back once. "How?" Marcus gasped, clutching his waterskin. "The wind has wiped our tracks since the ruins. No man can follow a trail in a shifting dune sea." Layla stopped her camel and pointed at the sky. "They are not looking at the ground, Roman. Look at the birds." Marcus squinted. High above, almost invisible in the white-hot glare of the sun, there were 3 vultures circling with mechanical precision. "These are not scavengers," she whispered. "These are the king's hunters. They have trained the raptors to follow the scent of the kohl. The antimony has a smell that only the birds and the blind can recognize." As they took shelter under a rocky overhang, Marcus opened his satchel. He was a man of the Mediterranean, raised on the logic of Aristotle and the geometry of Euclid. He began to sketch. "If what you say is true," he muttered, drawing a diagram of the human eye, "the substance you call ithmid doesn't just sharpen the image, it expands the aperture." "Explain your magic drawings, Roman." Layla peered at the parchment. Your kohl, Marcus explained, pointing to his sketch. It likely acts as a catalyst. In the Roman lands, we have glassmakers who use lead to change how light bends. I believe your antimony allows the eye to process short-wave radiation, what we call the violet end of the spectrum. You aren't seeing further in the way a tower is taller. You are seeing the energy that heat leaves behind. You are seeing the world's echo. Layla looked at him with a mixture of pity and wonder. You use so many words to describe a gift from the stars. My grandmother said the earth is a veil. Most people see the fabric. We see the threads. On the fourth day, the horizon vanished. It didn't fade. It was swallowed. A wall of bruised purple and angry ochre rose from the earth, reaching toward the heavens. It was a haboob, a sandstorm of biblical proportions. Khalid, the guide, fell to his knees, pressing his face into the sand. "The shaitan is coming," he cried. "We must bury ourselves or be flayed alive." But Layla stood tall. She grabbed Marcus by the collar. "Do not hide. If you hide, the Himyarites will find us in the stillness after the storm. We must move through it." "Through it," Marcus shouted over the rising roar, which sounded like 1,000 lions. "We will be blinded. We will lose our way." "I am never blind," Layla said. She took a handful of the shimmering kohl and applied it heavily to Marcus's eyelids. "Do not blink. If you blink, the dust will cut your soul. Keep your eyes open and look at me." Marcus did as he was told. The pain was instantaneous, a searing white-hot needle behind his brow. But then the world transformed. The wall of sand didn't look like dust anymore. It looked like a swirling galaxy of translucent crystals. He could see the currents of the wind, the rivers of air moving between the grains. He saw the heat signatures of the camels, glowing embers of red and gold. And then he saw them. Behind them, 5 miles away, but visible through the solid wall of the storm, were the Himyarite riders. They were struggling. Their horses were panicking, their eyes covered with leather hoods. "They are blind," Marcus yelled. "And we are not. Now we run." Guided by Layla's impossible vision, they navigated the heart of the storm. They didn't move in a straight line. They followed the veins of silence, pockets of low pressure that Layla could see in the air. By the time the winds died down, they were standing before a massive limestone formation known as the Cleft of the Moon. It was a jagged tear in the earth, hidden by a natural illusion of shadows. "This is it," Layla said, "the last well of Jadis." They descended into the cool, damp darkness of the canyon. As Marcus's eyes adjusted, the kohl's effects beginning to fade into a dull ache, he realized they were not alone. From the shadows emerged warriors clad in desert gray. These were not the broken refugees Marcus expected. They were lean, sharp-eyed, and armed with bows made of composite horn. "Who brings a Roman to our sanctuary?" a voice boomed. An old man stepped forward. He was blind. His eyes were scarred over with white tissue, but he moved with the grace of a leopard. "He is a seeker, grandfather," Layla said. "He knows the science of the eye. He saw the Himyarites through the haboob." The old man turned his sightless face toward Marcus. "A Roman. Your people built roads to connect the world. My people built eyes to see through it. Tell me, Roman, what is worth seeing in a world that is rotting?" "The world isn't rotting, Elder. It is changing. My empire is crumbling in the west,
and new powers rise in the east. If your gift, the gift of Zarqa, is used for war, it will be the end of all secrets. But if it is shared, we could chart the stars, navigate the furthest oceans, and cure the darkness of the mind." The elder laughed, a dry, rasping sound. "The Himyarites want to use us as living maps for their conquests. You want to use us as science for your books. No one wants to just let us see." Before Marcus could respond, a horn echoed from the top of the canyon. The Himyarites hadn't been defeated by the storm. They had followed the vultures. "Prepare the oil," the elder shouted, his blindness no hindrance to his command. "Layla, to the heights. Tell the archers where to strike. The Roman stays with me. If we fall, he falls with us." The sun dipped below the jagged rim of the canyon, plunging the cleft of the moon into a deep, bruised purple. For the Himyarite soldiers above, the world became a trap of shadows and uncertainty. But for the Jadis, the night was merely a different kind of canvas. "The kohl, Roman, apply more," the elder commanded. Marcus's hands trembled as he smeared the dark paste onto his eyelids once again. This time, the transition was faster. The canyon walls didn't just turn gray, they became transparent blueprints of heat. He could see the warmth radiating from the stones where the sun had baked them all day. More importantly, he saw the soldiers above. High on the rim, the Himyarite soldiers appeared as flickering orange candles against a cold blue background. Every breath they exhaled was a puff of glowing mist. "They are positioning their archers," Layla's voice drifted down from a ledge 20 feet above. "They think the height gives them the advantage. They do not realize they are silhouettes against the sky." Zaid, the Himyarite commander, stood at the edge of the precipice. To him, the canyon was a black maw. He couldn't see the Jadis, but he knew they were there. "Fire at will," Zaid roared. "Light the arrows. I want to see their faces."
The sky was suddenly streaked with hundreds of flaming projectiles. They arched gracefully into the dark, illuminating the limestone walls for a split second before thudding into the sand or extinguishing in the canyon's small pools. "Wasteful," the elder whispered. "They fight the darkness as if it were an enemy. We use the darkness as a cloak." At a signal from Layla, a sharp, bird-like whistle, the Jadis archers responded. They didn't use fire. They didn't need light. Marcus watched in awe as the Jadis snipers aimed at the heat signatures of the men above. They weren't aiming for the soldiers. They were aiming for the gaps in their armor, the armpits, the throats, the exposed thighs. The screams began shortly after. It was a terrifying, one-sided slaughter. The Himyarites were being picked off by an enemy they couldn't see, from a darkness that seemed to have eyes. As the battle raged, Marcus noticed something the others had missed. His Roman training in engineering and logistics allowed him to see the shape of the enemy's movements. "Layla," Marcus shouted, pointing toward a narrow path on the western ridge. "They are diverting. Zaid is no fool. He knows he can't win a ranged battle. He's sending a small group with heavy shields to collapse the natural bridge at the canyon's mouth. If they do that, the ceiling will fall, and we'll be buried alive." Layla turned her gaze toward the ridge. "I see them, but they have testudo shields, ironclad. Our arrows will bounce off." "Not if you hit the hinge of the rock," Marcus said, grabbing a piece of charcoal and sketching rapidly on the canyon floor. Look at the strata of the limestone. There is a fault line right there. If your men can drop a heavy enough weight on that specific point, the ridge will collapse outward, taking the Himyarites with it. The elder leaned in, his sightless eyes appearing to read the air around Marcus's voice. The Roman suggests we use the earth as a hammer. Lila, can you see the crack he speaks of? Lila squinted, her pupils expanding until her eyes were twin voids of sapphire. Yes, it looks like a vein of ice in the stone. It is fragile. The Jadists didn't use arrows for this. They used the fire of the desert, a primitive form of naphtha they had stored in clay jars. Two Jadist scouts, moving like mountain goats, scaled the inner wall. They reached a ledge directly opposite the fault line. Below them, Zaid's elite guard was hammering at the base of the bridge, their iron shields overlapping like the scales of a serpent. "Now!" Lila cried. The clay jars were hurled. They didn't hit the soldiers. They hit the fault line Marcus had identified. The naphtha ignited, the intense heat causing the moisture-trapped limestone to expand and shatter with the sound of a thunderclap. The entire western ridge groaned. A crack, jagged and white, raced across the stone. With a roar that shook the very foundations of the desert, thousands of tons of rock slid into the abyss. The Himyarite testudo was crushed instantly. The screams were cut short by the weight of the earth. Silence returned to the cleft of the moon, broken only by the settling of dust. Marcus stood in the center of the canyon, his lungs burning from the coal and the smoke. He had just helped a hidden tribe annihilate a royal army. He was no longer just a scholar. He was a participant in a secret war that had lasted for centuries. Zaid, the commander, had survived the collapse by a few feet. He stood on the remaining ledge, looking down into the darkness. He couldn't see Marcus, but he knew he was there. "You have won tonight, Roman," Zaid's voice echoed, filled with a cold, simmering rage. "But you have also revealed yourself. You think you are protecting this blue bloodline. You have only made them a more valuable prize. My king will not send scouts next time. He will send an empire." The elder walked over to Marcus and placed a heavy, calloused hand on his shoulder. "He is right. The secret of Zarqa Al-Yamama is no longer a legend. It is a target. And you, Marcus of Rome, you are the one who showed us how to kill with it." Marcus looked at Lila. Her eyes were glowing faintly in the dark, reflecting the dying embers of the naphtha fire. She looked beautiful, and she looked terrifying. "Where do we go now?" Marcus asked. "To the heart of the sun, to the great sand sea, where even the vultures dare not fly." The journey away from the cleft of the moon was a descent into a world that should not exist. The great sand sea was a place where the wind sang in 1,000 different voices, a phenomenon the locals called the singing sands. To Marcus, it sounded like the low, rhythmic chanting of a distant choir. "It is the friction of the grains," Marcus whispered, trying to remain the scientist, even as his senses began to unravel. "The size of the sand particles, they create a resonance." Lila, riding ahead on her white dromedary, didn't look back. "It is the sound of the ancestors, Marcus. They are deciding if you are allowed to find the path." As they traveled,
The effects of the antimony kohl began to change Marcus. It was no longer just about seeing further. His mind was beginning to map the world in 3 dimensions. He could feel the height of a dune before they climbed it. He could see the water table hundreds of feet beneath the parched surface. He was losing his Roman identity, piece by piece, becoming something more and something more dangerous. On the 7th day, the horizon began to ripple. Marcus expected another storm, but what he saw was more impossible. A city appeared to float in the air, suspended above the heat haze. It was made of translucent alabaster and polished obsidian. Towers reached up like frozen lightning, and gardens of deep emerald green hung from the battlements. A mirage, Marcus breathed, wiping sweat from his brow. A complex refraction of light through layers of varying air density. No, Lila said, her voice filled with a rare warmth. It is the city of the Unseeing. It is built in a depression so deep that the heat of the desert creates a permanent shield of bent light. To the world, we are a shimmer of heat, but to those who know where to look.
As they rode forward, the floating city suddenly dropped. They passed through a shimmering curtain of air, a natural optical barrier, and entered a lush, sunken valley. The architecture was unlike anything Marcus had seen in Rome or Byzantium. There were no straight lines. Everything was curved, designed to catch the light at specific angles. The buildings acted as massive lenses, channeling sunlight into underground chambers where the Jedi's lived in cool, illuminated comfort. Marcus was led into the Great Hall of Lenses. The walls were lined with massive, polished crystals of antimony and quartz. At the center sat 3 women, all with the striking blue eyes of the bloodline. They were the triad of the horizon. "You bring a man of the West," the eldest woman said. Her eyes were so bright they seemed to emit their own light. "A man who thinks with his hands and measures with his eyes?" "He saved us at the Cleft," Layla defended. "He saw the fault in the stone that we could not." The elder woman stood, her silk robes hissing against the floor. "He saw the how, but does he understand the why? Our mother, Zarqa, did not use her gift to kill. She used it to warn. Since her death, we have hidden. We have become ghosts. And now, a Roman brings the fire of war back to our gates." Marcus stepped forward, bowing as he would to a senator. "My ladies, the world is shrinking. Rome's thirst for spice and silk has opened the desert. The Himyarites are only the first. If you remain ghosts, you will be hunted until the last blue eye is plucked from its socket. But if you stand, if you use your sight to lead, you can build a kingdom that no empire can touch." For the next month, Marcus was not a prisoner, but he was not free. He was a student. Layla took him to the Chamber of Refractions. There she taught him that the blue sight was not just about the kohl, it was about the focus of the mind. "The Roman eye is greedy," she told him, as they sat in total darkness. "You want to see everything at once. You must learn to see the void between the objects, see the air, see the intent." Under her tutelage, Marcus began to master the layered vision. He learned to peel back the layers of the world. He could look at a piece of wood
and see the rings of its life. He could look at a person and see the quickening of their pulse. His relationship with Layla deepened in the quiet of the valley. One night, under a sky so clear that the Milky Way looked like a river of silver, Marcus took her hand. In Rome, we have stars, but we use them only to find our way home. Here, you live within them. Layla looked at him, her blue eyes softening. You are changing, Marcus. The antimony is in your blood now. You will never be able to live in the gray cities of your people again. You are becoming a creature of the horizon. The peace of the valley was shattered by a single, exhausted scout. He arrived on a dying horse, his body covered in the red dust of the northern plains. They are coming, the scout gasped, but it is not just the Himyarites. Marcus felt a chill go down his spine. Who else? Men in iron lorica, men with red shields and eagles of gold. They have made a pact with the king of Himyar. Marcus stood up, his face pale. Rome! The council of the site turned their terrifying gazes toward him. Your people, Marcus? You told us they were too far. You told us they were crumbling. The frontier governors, Marcus whispered, the realization hitting him like a blow. If the emperor's legates think there is a weapon in the desert that can see through walls and navigate the trackless seas, they will burn the world to have it. The city of the Unseeing was no longer a sanctuary. It was a cage, and Marcus, the man who had brought the secret to light, was now the only one who could save it from his own kin. The horizon did not shimmer with heat. It bristled with iron. Marcus stood on the outer parapet of the city of the Unseeing, his Roman soul warring with his desert heart. Through his antimony-enhanced vision, the approaching force was terrifyingly clear. It was the Legio III Cyrenaica, the Third Cyrenaican Legion, specialists in desert warfare. Beside them rode the Himyarite cavalry, a sea of flowing robes and curved steel. But it was the Roman siege engines that chilled Marcus's blood. He saw the onagers, catapults, and the massive ballistas being dragged across the dunes on timber sleds. They don't just want to capture us, Layla said, her voice trembling for the first time. They want to dismantle us. They want the source, Marcus replied, his eyes tracing the red crests of the centurions. They believe the secret of the blue site is a physical object, a gem or a god. They don't realize it is a way of being. The elder of the Jadis called a war council in the Chamber of Refractions. The atmosphere was thick with the scent of ozone and incense. We cannot fight them in a field, Marcus stated, drawing a map of the valley in the sand. A Roman legion is a machine. If you throw yourselves at them, they will grind you into the dust. We must use their own logic against them. And what is the logic of the wolf? The elder asked. The wolf relies on its pack, but if the pack cannot see its leader, it scatters. The Romans communicate with signals, flags, horns, and polished mirrors. They move as one because they see as one. He looked at the massive crystals lining the room. We are going to take their sight away, not with darkness, but with light. As the legion reached the perimeter of the valley, the Roman legate, a man named Valerius, gave the order to deploy. He was a veteran of the Parthian Wars, a man who believed in the absolute supremacy of Roman steel. Scouts report a shimmer ahead, Valerius told his tribune. A trick of the light. Ignore it. We march through the center, capture the woman with the blue eyes alive. The rest are expendable. But as the sun reached its zenith, the shimmer changed.
Using the city's architectural lenses and a series of mobile mirrors made of polished bronze, the jadis began to redirect the desert sun. They didn't aim at the soldiers. They aimed at the Romans' silver-plated shields and polished helmets. Suddenly, the Roman lines were hit by concentrated beams of white-hot light. It wasn't enough to burn skin, but it was enough to cause flash blindness. Every time a centurion tried to signal his sentry, a beam of light would strike his eyes, leaving him stumbling in a world of purple splotches. "They are using the sun as an archer," a soldier screamed, dropping his pilum to cover his face. In the chaos of the light war, the jadis archers moved. They didn't wear armor. They wore sand cloaks that matched the exact hue and texture of the dunes. To a Roman eye, they were invisible until they were 10 paces away. Marcus led a small group of scouts into the Roman flank. He felt like a traitor, but as he watched the legionaries begin to fire blindly into the empty dunes, he knew he had chosen the side of the future over the side of the past. "Aim for the horses of the messengers," Marcus commanded Layla. Layla let fly an arrow. It whistled through the air, guided by a vision that calculated wind resistance and heat distortion in a heartbeat. The arrow found the throat of a messenger's stallion 300 yards away. The Roman machine was breaking. Without communication, the cohorts began to overlap. Panic, the ancient enemy of the legion, began to seep into the ranks. Valerius was not a man to be defeated by mirrors. Realizing he couldn't see his enemy, he decided to destroy the environment. "Fire the onagers," he roared, his eyes squinted shut. "Load the pitch. If we cannot see the city, we will burn the air until the shadows are revealed." The Roman catapults groaned. Massive balls of straw soaked in bitumen were ignited and launched into the hidden valley. The mirage shield, the layer of bent air that protected the city, began to fail as the heat from the fires disrupted the atmospheric layers. The city of the Unseeing was suddenly exposed. Its alabaster towers and emerald gardens stood naked under the sun. "The veil is torn," the Himyarite king shouted, drawing his sword. "Charge!" The city gates, wrought from desert iron and desert glass, groaned under the impact of a Roman ram. Marcus stood at the gate, a Roman gladius in one hand and a jadis bow in the other. Beside him stood Layla, her face painted with the sacred antimony, her eyes glowing with a terrifying celestial light. "If we die here, Marcus," Layla said, her voice calm amid the roar of battle, "what will they write in your books?" Marcus looked at the approaching wave of red shields. "They will write that for one day the desert was not a wasteland, but a throne, and that the world was too small for what we saw." The gates shattered. The Roman soldiers poured in, but they stopped in their tracks. Standing before them was not a panicked mob, but a line of blue-eyed warriors standing in perfect silence. At their center stood a foreigner in Roman rags, his eyes reflecting the same impossible blue. "I am Marcus Aurelius Severus," he shouted in Latin,
and you are trespassing in a world you are not worthy to see." The clash that followed was not a battle, it was a symphony of violence. The silence that had greeted the Romans lasted only a heartbeat. Then the air was filled with the rhythmic thud of pylons hitting glass. The city of the Unseeing, designed for light and beauty, was brittle. Under the weight of the Roman assault, the alabaster walls began to spiderweb. Marcus moved like a man possessed. His vision, hypersaturated by the antimony and the adrenaline of the breach, saw the world in slow motion. He saw the tension in the Roman bowstrings before they released. He saw the minute shift in a legionary's weight before a thrust. He was no longer a scholar. He was a living weapon of foresight. "Hold the inner circle," Marcus yelled, his voice a strange mix of Latin command and Arab grit. Layla stood behind him, her bow a blur of motion. Every arrow she released found the narrow slit of a Roman visor or the exposed neck of a Himyarite rider. To the Romans, she looked like a vengeful spirit of the sands, a ghost that did not miss. Through the smoke and the dust of the falling gates, a path cleared. Legate Valerius stepped forward, his silver-embossed breastplate splattered with the red mud of the valley. He recognized Marcus immediately, not by his face, but by the way he held his sword. "Severus," Valerius spat, his voice echoing in the vaulted hall. "I heard you had gone native. I didn't realize you had become a traitor to the eagle." "The eagle is blind, Valerius," Marcus replied, stepping over a fallen pillar. "You came here to steal a light you cannot comprehend. You would take this sight and use it to find more people to tax and more lands to burn." "I would use it to bring order," Valerius roared, lunging forward with his gladius. The duel was a clash of two worlds. Valerius fought with the brutal, efficient geometry of Rome, short, stabbing motions designed to kill quickly. Marcus fought with the fluid, predictive grace of the Jadis. He didn't block, he evaporated. He moved just an inch before the blade arrived, guided by the heat shadow of Valerius's intent. As they fought, the city around them began to die. The Roman firepots had done their work. The great lenses that channeled the sun were cracking from the heat, and as they shattered, they focused stray beams of light randomly, igniting tapestries and melting the very sand into jagged glass. Layla saw the elder falling, struck by a Himyarite spear. She let out a cry that was more ancient than the city itself. In that moment, her focus broke. "Layla, no!" Marcus shouted. Distracted, Marcus felt the cold bite of Valerius's steel. The Roman blade found a gap in Marcus's tunic, slicing across his ribs. Marcus staggered, his vision flickering. For a second, the blue sight failed him. The world turned gray, flat, and terrifyingly small. "You see?" Valerius sneered, raising his sword for the final blow. But Marcus wasn't looking at Valerius. He was looking at the great lens above the hall, the massive crystalline dome that sat at the apex of the city. It was cracked, leaning precariously on its bronze mountings.
Marcus didn't reach for his sword. He reached for his bow. "I don't need magic to see the obvious, Valerius," Marcus whispered. He fired a single arrow. It wasn't aimed at the legate. It struck the central locking pin of the great lens. With a sound like the world's heart breaking, the dome collapsed. But it didn't just fall, it tilted. For one final blinding second, the crystal caught the full, unobstructed power of the Arabian sun and focused it into a single, white-hot pillar of light. The pillar struck the center of the Roman line. The intensity was so great that it didn't just burn, it vaporized the oxygen in the hall. The Roman soldiers, blinded and choking, fell back in terror. Even Valerius was thrown to the ground, his retinas scorched by the divine brilliance. In the blinding light, Marcus found Layla. Her eyes were streaming with tears. The antimony was washing away, leaving her vulnerable. "We have to go," Marcus urged, pulling her toward the secret tunnels beneath the city. "The city is lost, but the bloodline can survive." "My people," she sobbed, looking at the ruins. "Your people are the wind now," Marcus said. "But as long as one of us sees, they are never truly gone." They fled through the cooling subterranean vents, emerging miles away in a hidden canyon as the sun began to set. Behind them, a pillar of smoke rose from the great sand sea, the funeral pyre of the city of the Unseeing. Years later, a rumor reached the courts of Byzantium and the markets of Alexandria. They spoke of a pair of travelers, a man with the bearing of a Roman and a woman with eyes the color of a winter sky. They were never seen in the cities. They stayed in the high places, the mountain peaks of the Sinai and the deep ridges of the Atlas. It was said that they could predict a storm a week before it arrived, and that they knew the movement of armies before the generals had even signed the orders. Marcus Aurelius Severus never returned to Rome. He had seen too much. To a man who has seen the threads of the universe, the politics of empires are nothing more than the squabbles of ants. In the final days of his life, sitting on a cliff overlooking the Red Sea, Marcus looked at his granddaughter. She was a young girl, born of the desert and the West, playing with a small vial of dark, shimmering powder. "Grandfather," the girl asked, "why do we always look so far away?" Marcus smiled, his eyes still retaining a faint, ghostly ring of sapphire. He looked out over the water, seeing the ships in the harbor of Berenice, the fish in the depths, and the stars beginning to wake in the east. "Because, my child," he whispered, "the world is only as small as you allow it to be. Your ancestor, Zarqa Al-Yamama, knew that the greatest tragedy isn't being blind, it's having eyes and refusing to look." The legend of Zarqa Al-Yamama did not end in the ruins of Al-Yamama. It flowed into the blood of the wanderers, the explorers, and the seekers. For as long as there is a horizon, there will be those who try to see past it. In the year 2025, archaeologists in the Saudi desert would discover a strange sight, a sunken valley with walls of fused glass and alabaster. They would find a single Roman coin dated to the reign of Gallienus and a small empty vial of antimony. The lead researcher, a woman with keen blue eyes, would look at the horizon and feel a strange, familiar pulse in the air. She wouldn't need a telescope to know that a storm was coming. She could see it.